Chapter 1, Graduation. Lucas Grimsby sat in his chair at Hogwarts graduation, watching as his classmates beamed with excitement about their futures. Gryffindor had just won 1,000,000 house points in a blatant display of favoritism, and the entire Slytherin house had been quietly marched off to Hogwarts prison without so much as a trial. It was probably for the best. At the front of the Grand Hall, Professor Dumbledore wiped away a theatrical tear as he delivered the closing speech. Today, my dear students, you step into the world as the next generation of witches and wizards. Some of you will be aurors, some will be great scholars, and others will go on to... He paused, giving Lucas a knowing glance. Figure things out later. Lucas ignored the remark. He was too busy listening to his classmates proudly declare their post-Hogwarts plans. Hermione Granger was headed straight into high-level wizard law, already drafting policies on wand registration and potion ethics. Ron Weasley planned to become a professional Quidditch commentator, despite lacking any deep knowledge on the sport beyond bludgers. Draco Malfoy smugly declared he'd be starting a high-end wizarding fashion brand specializing in robes that cost more than most people's houses. Even Neville Longbottom, who had barely made it through school without setting himself on fire, was opening a thriving magical plant nursery. And then there was Lucas, who had spent his entire time at Hogwarts running underground poker games, smuggling Muggle artifacts, and tricking professors with sleight of hand. He had zero plans. "Well, Lucas," Hagrid said, clapping a meaty hand on his back, "what's next for you?" Lucas hesitated. I was thinking of, you ain't got a plan, do ya?" Lucas sighed. "Not even a little one." Hagrid, ever the well-intentioned giant, handed Lucas a small cage. Inside, a wide-eyed owl blinked up at him. "Here you go, lad, a companion for the road." It was a heartfelt gift. It lasted 5 seconds. Professor Snape, still drunk from celebrating the school year's end, stumbled backward into a chair and crunch right onto Lucas's new pet. The hall went silent. Snape stared blankly at the now lifeless owl before sighing, rubbing his temples and muttering, "There goes old Snoopy Poo, snapping owls' necks again." Lucas was too horrified to speak, but the professors reacted immediately. McGonagall let out a tragic wail and disappeared in a burst of smoke, followed by Flitwick, Sprout, and even Trelawney, who sobbed as she faded into the ether. One by one, they all apparated dramatically out of the hall, until only Lucas remained. Without magic, Lucas had no way to teleport back home. Nobody had thought of this. So, with nothing but his diploma and shattered expectations, Lucas hitchhiked out of Hogwarts. He stuck out his thumb on the edge of a lonely highway. After a few hours, the deep rumble of an approaching semi-truck caught his attention. The door swung open, and there sat Residue, a hulking, mysterious figure with a scent of wet newspaper and questionable origins. Lucas hesitated. "You, taking passengers?" Residue stared at him for a long moment before grunting. "Show me skin." "What?" Residue gestured lazily. "Your ankle. That's the toll." Lucas sighed and rolled up his pant leg just enough to satisfy this clearly ridiculous demand. Satisfied, Residue waved him inside. As the truck roared down the highway, Residue leaned back in his seat. "Used to smuggle creatures between the wizard world and the muggle world," he murmured. "Now, I just transport whatever needs moving. Dragons, refrigerators, the occasional cursed object." Lucas stared. "You ever ship someone across dimensions?" Residue shrugged. "You ever been mailed in a box?" Lucas considered this. "Not yet."
Chapter 2. Residue's Tall Tales. Lucas had barely settled into the seat when he caught a whiff of the truck's interior, a powerful mix of damp leather, burned coffee, and something vaguely like old soup, except there were no visible containers. Residue's coat, stitched together from animal pelts, didn't help the situation. Lucas wasn't sure if the pelts had ever been properly cleaned, or if their former owners had simply accepted their fate. He turned toward the window for fresh air, but the landscape outside had changed. Where before there was a normal highway, now the terrain was strangely blocky. Mountains formed perfect, unnatural squares. Trees were identical copies, and oddly placed floating platforms hovered above deep canyons. Lucas blinked. Residue didn't seem to notice. Instead, he adjusted his grip on the steering wheel and said, "You ever meet a train station woman and follow her home?" Lucas frowned. "What?" Residue didn't clarify. He just launched into his story. I met this woman at a train station years ago. Wild-eyed, smelled like incense, talked like a prophecy was about to happen. She said she lived in a place full of creativity. So I went. Lucas braced himself. The place was normal, except for the purple man. Residue exhaled slowly, as if recalling a mystical memory. That door, never open. Inside, a blonde guy with a goatee wearing a purple shirt, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling Sharpie drawings. The walls were covered, every inch, with illustrations that shifted when you rotated them. Birds became elephants, faces became mazes, pure creative madness. Lucas was intrigued despite himself. That sounds kind of... Residue held up a finger. It gets worse. Lucas shut his mouth. Residue continued. At exactly 2:17 a.m., an Indian man appeared at the doorway. Nobody knew him. He had no introduction, no warning. He just said, "Would you like a slice of pizza?" Lucas couldn't stop himself. "Did you take it?" Residue nodded solemnly. It was all veggie, mostly mushrooms. Lucas leaned back, absorbing the information. Then he glanced out the window again. The scenery had changed again. Tall metallic towers loomed overhead, blinking neon signs reflected off the wet streets, and deep, echoing voices whispered from hidden alleyways. A single figure stood under a street lamp, face obscured by a glowing mask, watching the truck as it passed. Lucas shuddered. Residue paid no attention. Instead, he tapped the dashboard. This was back when I ran shipments between the Wizarding and Muggle worlds. These days, I'm smuggling Nintendo Switch 2s. Lucas nearly choked. "Wait, you're smuggling gaming consoles?" Residue shrugged. "The tariffs are a nightmare. Wizards don't want to deal with customs, so I sneak them in quiet." Lucas was still processing this when he glanced out the window again. The landscape had changed. Red cliffs, distant spires, strange creatures lumbering across the horizon. Some too tall, some too wide, some carrying crude weapons. Lucas exhaled slowly. Residue wasn't looking. Instead, he nodded to himself. Lucas braced himself. Residue smirked. "You ever meet a man who sends his luggage on vacation?" Lucas narrowed his eyes. "What?" Residue continued. "I met him in Florida, full head-to-toe Walmart clothing. Thought he was just some entrepreneur. Turns out, he ran hot dog stands, ice cream shops, built a log cabin." Lucas blinked. "And," Residue sighed, "said he was so financially stable that he sent his luggage on a week-long cruise just to give it world experience." Lucas nearly fell out of his seat. Residue nodded. "Experienced luggage holds your clothes better, apparently." Lucas wheezed. "What did you say to him?" Residue shrugged. "Said it sounded dumb. Offered to buy him a beer out of pity." Lucas laughed. "Did he accept?" Residue sighed, gripping the wheel. "He ordered 6. Lucas nearly passed out. Residue stretched. "It turned out okay, though. That trip paid out big. Delivered a whole batch of DJ tables with little knobs and buttons. Walked away with a fortune." Lucas was still laughing when he glanced out the window again. This time, the world outside was soft pastel clouds and endless rolling green hills with trees that looked too round. A large floating platform hovered just beyond the horizon, a cartoonish city balanced impossibly on top. Lucas stared at it. Residue kept driving. Few minutes passed in silence. Then Residue loudly ripped ass to break the silence and said, "You know, I used to believe JFK Jr. was going to be reborn as a hologram." Lucas glanced over, confused. Residue nodded slowly. "Whole group of us used to meet online. Thought we were decoding secret military messages in pancake recipes." He adjusted a knob on the dashboard that didn't appear connected to anything. "Anyway, long story short, I accidentally stormed the Capitol, got really turned around inside. Mistook an office for the bathroom. By the time I realized it was too late, had to commit. Left a little something on Nancy Pelosi's desk." Lucas coughed, and was completely caught off guard. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. He turned his head toward the window instead. Outside, the landscape had changed again. An ocean floated in the sky now. Massive coral formations drifted lazily above the horizon. Fish swam through clouds like birds, and giant jellyfish pulsed gently near a sun that hung too close. The truck rumbled forward, undisturbed by gravity or sense. Residue drummed his fingers on the wheel. Anyway, they let me off with a warning. Said technically it wasn't a crime if you believed it was a dream. Lucas gave a small nod, his eyes still on the jellyfish. Residue added, "Not saying I regret it, but I do miss having TSA clearance." And the truck rolled on.
Chapter 3. Backstory. Then Eggs. "So," Residue grunted, "where you headed, kid?" Lucas sighed and leaned his head against the window. "Home," he muttered. "After leading a very interesting life at Hogwarts." Residue snorted. "Interesting, huh?" Lucas sat up straighter, ignoring him. "You don't understand, man. The last 4 years were insane. My first year started out normal enough. Then I spiked Snape's cauldron. I accidentally got him drunk in the middle of class. He sang Africa by Toto to the entire room. Then in my second year, my sleight of hand card tricks became famous across Hogwarts. Nobody realized they were just Muggle magic. The year after that, Lord Voldemort disguised himself as a mysterious transfer student and tried to seduce me. It worked. I had actual romantic feelings for her, but the moment I tried to make a move, she ran away. And in my last year, I somehow ended up entered into the Tri-Wizard tournament. When I finally found the stupid trophy, I realized wizard stuff is so boring, so I dropped everything and went off to play video games instead." Residue exhaled slowly. "Kid," he said flatly, "your stories are boring." Lucas blinked. "Excuse me?" Residue shook his head. "It's just too much reference material from an already established series. Feels distracting." Lucas's jaw dropped. What?" Residue waved a hand lazily. "Look, you really ought to have your own world experiences. You're leaning too hard on the magical nonsense. You're telling me your entire personality is just, I went to Hogwarts?" Lucas threw up his hands. "Well, isn't that great? Everyone's a critic. Just because someone uses a tool to help their creativity doesn't mean it's bad. People like that should take the time to realize that art is something anyone can." Residue slammed on the brakes and grunted. "I need to stop at a Denny's, fill up gas, end this horrible conversation." Denny's was somehow worse than the truck. Residue slid into a booth, eyeing the menu with a steely glare. Lucas sat across from him, still trying to process his previous humiliation. The waitress walked up, middle-aged, pinched face. She had the unshakable energy of someone who had seen too much and cared too little. "What do you want?" she asked, not even pretending to be polite. Residue cracked his neck. "2 eggs, over easy. Even though they give me the runs, I don't care. I guess I'm ordering them just to disrespect you, Lucas, for telling such a lazy story." The waitress coughed loudly. "You ordering or what?" she snapped. Lucas opened the menu, scanning quickly. "Yeah, Hobbit funnel cake." Residue smirked. "Good choice, kid." They were back on the road. Lucas had been through a lot since graduation. The world felt messier than he remembered, louder, stickier, and way too interested in testing his patience. Riding with Residue hadn't helped. Lucas had now seen things, and frankly, he wanted to start forgetting them as soon as possible. Sometimes life sticks you in weird places, and when you can't escape, all you can do is close your eyes and hope sleep will sandpaper the time away. Residue burped, loudly and with intent, blasting a foul gust across the truck cab. Lucas jolted upright and instinctively turned toward the window. The truck rolled lazily down a sun-bleached Florida road, the air thick with the smell of gas station jerky and existential regret. "You know," Residue muttered, flicking something unidentifiable off his fingernail, "you're lucky I even got you this far. I don't usually drive people who can't chip in for gas." Lucas frowned, trying to block out the cocktail of strange odors radiating off Residue. Didn't you just use my last $20 to buy a mystery sandwich at that rest stop? The one literally labeled meat, don't ask? Residue shrugged. Needed protein. Lucas pinched the bridge of his nose. Where even are we? Residue pointed lazily at a cracked, sun-faded sign on the roadside that read, "Welcome to somewhere." "Please leave," Lucas squinted. "You're dropping me off here?" Residue nodded. "Yup." "This is where the road ends for me." With a sigh, Lucas stepped out onto the dusty, half-paved road and surveyed the town. Palm trees leaned at angles that should have been impossible. Every building looked like it had either shut down a decade ago or was somehow still open against its will. The whole place smelled faintly like wet dog. "Fantastic," Lucas muttered. "Escaped magical nonsense just to end up in this fever dream." Residue revved the engine. "Good luck, kid." And with that, he peeled off. Lucas adjusted his backpack and stared down the crooked street. No map, no idea what came next. He sighed and started walking.
Chapter 4. Thunder Nugget. After 20 minutes of wandering streets that looked like they'd been abandoned, Lucas found himself in front of a hotel. It was tall, old, and the kind of unsettling that didn't try to hide it. Faded red carpet stretched up to its front doors like a dried tongue. The lobby was trying very hard to seem elegant. Too many chandeliers, too much velvet, but everything hummed a little too loud. The air smelled like mouldy air freshener and stale gilt. The receptionist looked like she'd been carved from beeswax. Lucas approached the desk. "You got any rooms?" "Just one," she said without looking up. Lucas reached for his wallet, then froze. "I don't have any cash." He dropped his bag and started rifling through it like a raccoon in a vending machine. No wallet, no cards. Then he spotted something tucked near the bottom, an envelope, yellowed and wrinkled, with the word "Kid" scrawled across the front. The letter read, "Well, kid, I guess it would be kind of rude not to give you some kind of graduation gift. Here's some money I made from my last score." Attached, a wad of questionable $100 bills totaling up to $3,000 and a winky face. At the bottom, in enormous letters, "Residue. I'll take the room." She handed him a heavy brass key and gestured vaguely toward the staircase. The room was a lot. Gold trim, velvet curtains, carpet so red it practically shouted. The armchair in the corner looked like it might blink if you stared too long. Lucas dropped his bag, collapsed on the bed. Then things got weird. The walls started bleeding. A voice whispered his name. He checked his phone. No signal. Great. The shower turned on. He got up, turned it off. Lucas sighed. "Genuinely, is this supposed to scare me?" The apparitions paused, seemingly confused by his lack of reaction. Lucas waved them off. "Listen, this happens all the time at Hogwarts." Eventually, everything stopped. Lucas slept like a baby. He woke up starving. Downstairs, in the far corner, a woman was occupying not just a booth, but the surrounding 2 tables and part of the hallway. She was massive, easily 500 pounds, wearing a stretched floral hoodie, tangled, unbrushed hair. 5 small dogs tangled around her ankles, barked at everything that moved, yanked their leashes in opposite directions, and occasionally bit one another. She ate pie between bites of sausage and sorted mail, while one of the dogs peed the floor. Lucas tried to sit far away. He really did. But the dogs had other plans. One, a miniature poodle in a rhinestone diaper, trotted over to sniff his ankle. Lucas gave a weak nod to the woman. She looked up from her napkins. "That one's named Salad. Don't let him fool you. He's violent." Lucas blinked. Cool name. Does he bite? He mostly bites other dogs, but if you're holding a bagel, he'll turn on you. Noted. Lucas watched Salad return to the chaos. The woman stuffed more syrup into her mouth and nodded toward the empty chair at her booth. You might as well sit here. They'll keep harassing you otherwise. Lucas moved over, careful not to trip on a leash or a Yorkshire Terrier in a sweater that said, "Ask me about my Irie." She extended a syrup-sticky hand. Trisha and Nugget. Lucas, he said, shaking it carefully. The moment lingered. Behind him, one of the staff cleared a table and muttered under their breath, "Thunder Nugget's back." Trisha froze for half a second, then returned to chewing without a word. Lucas pretended not to notice. "So," he said, "you running some kind of operation?" She perked up. 3, actually. Pie delivery, dog walking, and now I'm launching a financial consulting service for single pet owners. Pie poor profits. It's all about synergy. You get a slice of peach pie, I walk your dog, and then I explain how to turn your backyard into a passive income stream. I've got pamphlets, but they're all covered in yogurt. Don't ask why. Lucas leaned back in his chair, letting the chaos buzz around him. Lucas stepped into the town square, half expecting tumbleweeds to roll by. Instead, he was met with scarecrows. Lots of them. One was perched on a park bench, looking oddly relaxed. Another leaned against the window of a pharmacy like it was waiting for prescription refills. There was even one in the town hall fountain. Lucas frowned. This wasn't normal. He glanced at his phone. Still no signal. He sighed and kept walking. After passing 6 more inexplicably placed scarecrows, Lucas found himself at an antique store packed with relics from the past. The shelves were lined with cassette tapes, old lunchboxes, and board games with missing pieces. Then Lucas saw it. An NES cartridge with the title Bad Dudes. Intrigued, he plugged it into an ancient console the store had on display. The game booted up with glorious, pixelated absurdity. Lucas fought off ninja gangs until finally defeating the final boss. At the end, the screen read, "Congratulations, you saved the president. Now let's all get hamburgers." Lucas blinked. This game was ridiculous. He stared at the crude pixel art of the victorious president celebrating over burgers, then paused. Could an NES even handle rendering the president in 2025? Lucas doubted it. The sheer amount of orange required would probably overload the system, and honestly, could the cartridge even fit an ego that large? The pixels would struggle under the weight of pure, unfiltered self-importance. Lucas shook his head. Some things should stay in the past. As he bent down to put the cartridge back, something fell out from the shelf above. A crumpled old magazine wedged between 2 strategy guides. The cover read, "County Champion Recipes, July 1988 Pie-Off Edition." Lucas flipped through the pages, amused, until he hit a spread titled, "Lemon Cherry Detonation Pie Grand Prize Winner. Do not attempt if pregnant or near open flame." He raised his eyebrows. Now that's a pie. He brought it to the front counter. Demquarius was a man stuck in the past, and he loved talking about it. "You know what toys meant something?" he asked dreamily, launching into a long monologue about his boyhood. Lucas patiently waited through tales of yo-yos and pogs before holding up the magazine. "How much for this?" Demquarius inspected it as if it were a sacred relic. $3, or 2 and a Werther's original. Lucas handed over a 5 and left with his prize. As Dem Querius fumbled with the cash register, Lucas noticed a sign taped next to it. It was handwritten in Sharpie and curling at the corners, "If I'm not here, I'm in the restroom. Please do not knock. Serious business in progress. Do not interrupt. You've been warned." Next to the register sat a dusty hourglass turned sideways and a laminated note that read, "Bathroom is sacred. Time bends there." Lucas blinked, unsure if it was a joke or some kind of personal spiritual code. He shrugged it off. Back at the hotel, Lucas spread the magazine out like a sacred text. The pie was calling to him. He circled ingredients. He Googled conversions. He muttered calculations about crust stability. "You okay?" Thunder Nugget asked, sipping from a thermos labelled Pie Poor Profits HQ. "I've found something," Lucas whispered. "A forgotten recipe. A culinary weapon. I'm telling you, this pie could change your business forever." Thunder Nugget raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about a pie from a magazine that smells like mothballs?" "It's not just a pie," Lucas insisted. "It's victory wrapped in citrus and danger." She rolled her eyes. "Fine, I'll make it tomorrow." The second night in the hotel was quiet. Lucas flipped through channels on the ancient television until settling on the Coneheads. He laughed. Those alien weirdos seemed more normal than half the people he'd met at Hogwarts. Ron Weasley would fit right in with them, he thought. Then he heard it, a loud knocking sound from the room next door, muffled mumbling. Then 3 extremely aggressive shouts, completely incoherent. A door slammed. Lucas sat up. Now multiple doors in a row were slamming. Then 3 bone-rattling knocks on his own door. Lucas paused. Slowly he opened it. A woman stood 2 millimeters from his face. She screamed, "What do you want?" Lucas said, "Huh?" The woman screamed again, louder, "What do? You want—" Lucas looked at her, shocked and completely confused by what was going on. It was the middle of the night, and this woman was screaming directly into his face. The woman screamed one more time, "Blankets, towels, sheets. What do you want?" Lucas physically jolted. He had no idea what was happening. She stared directly into his soul. The woman then waddled away, leaving Lucas questioning reality. The next morning, Thunder Nugget gave it a try. She baked the pie exactly as described, down to the lemon zest compression technique noted in a sidebar. She placed it on the windowsill of their room to cool. Dem Querius, passing through the hotel patio, stopped cold. He squinted. Then his eyes widened. "I've seen this," he muttered. No, not today." He kicked open the door, grabbed Thunder Nugget by the arm, and flung them both to the floor. Seconds later, the pie detonated in a spectacular puff of sugared crust and hot cherry steam. A scorch mark was left on the windowsill. No one was harmed, but the mini-blast left the curtains caramelized. Thunder Nugget stared at him in disbelief. "You saved me?" Dem Querius nodded, dead serious. "I'm a time traveller, exclusively while using the bathroom. I saw this exact pie explosion yesterday. Don't ask questions. It involved bad tuna." She blinked. Still, that was impressive. There was a pause. Then Thunder Nugget smiled and said, "Want to go on a date?" They hit it off instantly. Within a week, they were inseparable, attending flea markets, comparing spatula designs, and baking increasingly unstable pies. By the end of the month, they were married in a small ceremony at the hotel breakfast bar. Lucas stood nearby during the vows, holding a decorative waffle iron and feeling extremely third-wheelie. Everywhere they went, he was a step behind. At the rehearsal dinner, he'd accidentally sat between them. At the reception, he knocked over the cake while trying to join a two-person photo booth. As they finished their first dance, Thunder Nugget pulled Lucas aside and handed him a plane ticket. "You gave me a recipe and accidentally introduced me to the love of my life," she said. "Thank you. Now go home." Lucas boarded the flight an hour later, wedged between a crying toddler and a man who snored like a woodchipper. He stared out the window and sighed. "Wonder what it's going to be like. Being around my parents again?" The seatbelt light dinged. He didn't know what came next. But for now, that was fine.
Chapter 5. The Return. Lucas had barely dropped his bag by the door when his parents cornered him at the kitchen table. He'd just returned from Florida. The house looked the same, the dusty fake fruit bowl, the overhead light that hummed louder than anyone acknowledged, the faint smell of burnt toast clinging to the walls. But his parents were different, older maybe. His dad, still in business casual, wasted no time before laying out expectations: job, rent, contribution. His mom offered brunch as a substitute for affection. They asked nothing about the past 4 years except whether he'd brought home a diploma or a certificate in something. Lucas said my degree was more hands-on. His dad squinted at him like he was an MLM recruiter, and his mom asked if he was doing drugs. The conversation ended when Lucas agreed he would get a job at Best Buy, pay for his own groceries, and keep the weirdness to himself. Day 1, his manager, a man so deeply overqualified yet painfully soulless, ushered him into training. "Rule 1, the manager said, not looking up from his clipboard. "Ignore the customers as much as possible." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What?" "If they make eye contact, break it immediately. If they ask for help, pretend not to hear. Customers are a problem until they give us money." Lucas nodded slowly. "Right, got it." "Rule 2, the manager continued, leaning in like he was revealing government secrets. "Upsell as aggressively as possible." Lucas blinked. "If a customer comes in with a budget of $400, sell them on an unbelievably perfect device that does everything they could ever dream of. Then, right before the sale is complete, reveal that the item actually costs $1,700. And then," the manager smirked, "pressure them into opening a Best Buy credit card." Lucas stared. "This is evil." Lucas attempted sleight of hand tricks while working the floor. None of them worked. A kid, a young wide-eyed boy, watched from the gaming aisle. He had a mop of slightly unruly brown hair, shoes that clearly had holes in them, and an oddly confident aura. His name tag read Scott Awesome. Scott approached Lucas, arms crossed. "You know," Scott said, "Muggle magic doesn't work on Muggles, but spells might work here." Lucas frowned. "How do you know that?" Scott smirked, leaning in. "When I was younger, I was visiting the Vatican. Got bored, rummaged through the Pope's desk, and found a pack of gum. Turns out, that gum was owned by Jesus. When I chewed it, I gained all the knowledge of the universe, temporarily." Lucas stared. "All of it?" Scott shrugged. "It faded. But for a moment, I saw divine truth." Lucas blinked again. "Simple incantations can do wonders in the Muggle world," Scott said. Lucas sighed. "I faked my way through Hogwarts. I have no magical power. My sleight of hand is all I've got." Then Scott asked about a Nintendo Switch 2. Lucas sighed. "I knew someone who used to smuggle those. But they're all sold out because Nintendo only made enough for scalpers." Scott slumped. "That's tragic." Lucas grinned. "You know what's better than a Switch?" Scott perked up. "A gaming PC. Same price, better specs, and it can even run ChatGPT to help write entire books for you." Scott was hooked. He nearly bought the computer until Lucas revealed it was actually $3,200 and he'd need a Best Buy credit card. Scott was furious. "I came here for a console," he said, scowling, "and now I'm being strong-armed into debt?" Lucas shrugged. Scott marched to the manager to complain. The manager smiled. He patted Lucas on the back. "Good job, kid," Scott stormed out, humiliated, angry, and filled with righteous fury. Someday, he thought, he'd get his revenge. He knew it. He chewed the gum. Lucas, feeling mildly guilty, ran up to Scott. "You might be able to find switch 2s at Target." Scott narrowed his eyes, then nodded gratefully before walking away. "Lucas," the manager growled. Lucas froze. "You sent a customer to another store?" Lucas gulped. "The first rule of Best Buy," the manager hissed, "is screw over the customer, get them into debt, and never send them to a different store." He crossed his arms. "Best Buy is the best. You are not. You're fired." Just like that, Lucas was out of a job. Lucas stepped through the front door. Before he could say anything, his father immediately launched into a tirade. "You got fired?" Said his dad, "You should do whatever it takes to make money, even if that means being a jerk or lying. All that matters in the universe is money." His father rubbed his temples, sighing dramatically. "Sending you to that goofy nonsense psycho school was the biggest mistake we ever made. What did you get out of it?" "Card tricks?" "Card tricks. Boy, that's really valuable," his mother chimed in. "Clown college would have been better," she muttered. "At least then you could work in the circus." Lucas sighed. He needed to escape. Lucas headed to Corey's house. Corey's father was obsessed with the Civil War. He had a full war map in the basement, complete with miniature figurines for reenactments and a framed newspaper clipping with fabricated headlines stating, "South victorious, Lincoln furious." Lucas and Corey sat in the living room, awkwardly listening as Corey's parents argue loudly in the kitchen. Corey's mother: "Stop ordering newspapers from fake historical societies just because they print your insane conspiracies." "They're not fake," Corey's father muttered. Corey rolled his eyes, finally deciding to step in. "Dad, seriously," Corey sighed. "Just admit it. The North won." Corey's father froze, eyes wide with betrayal. "You watch your tone, Clorax the Destroyer," Corey groaned. Lucas turned to Corey's mom. "Clorax the Destroyer?" Corey's mom sighed. "He was named after a Confederate general." Corey's mom turned to Lucas, setting her coffee down. "So," she said, "how has life been since you got back?" Lucas sighed. "Honestly, a disaster." He briefly recounted his misadventures. Corey's mom nodded sympathetically. "You know," she said, "maybe you should check out community college. It could be a better experience for you." She looked at Corey, crossing her arms. "And you should go too. You need an outside education, away from your father's influence." Corey sank further into his chair, groaning loudly. Lucas grinned. Maybe college wouldn't be the worst idea. He glanced at Corey. "I spent 4 years at school and didn't learn a single thing that could help me here," Lucas muttered. As it turned out, his Hogwarts degree was worth less than fool's gold, and Corey's informal education was somehow even worse.
Chapter 6. A New Life. A week into school, Lucas knew something was off. His class was taught by Professor Buttons, a TL39 graphing calculator someone plugged into the internet in 2009. He never stopped downloading. In his spare time, he writes fan fiction trilogies instead of grading his students' homework. The classroom was strange, to say the least. One girl ate nothing but Funyuns. Her bag was filled with them. A massive guy named Beef slept through class but still got every question right. And then there was Jeffrey, the fake plastic houseplant everyone treated like a student. No one seemed to notice it wasn't alive. But the weirdest student was John Electronic. He was twitchy, wore fingerless gloves, and drank only Mountain Dew. John was obsessed with the 1988 NES game Bad Dudes, which he claimed was based on his real life. According to him, he had been recruited by the government after scoring a perfect run, and had since gone on stealth missions around the world, rappelling into embassies, defusing bombs with his shoelaces, and once losing a girlfriend in a rooftop sword fight in North Korea. Lucas tried to keep his distance, but his partner was Corey. During the midterm, they both copied John's answers and fed them into Buttons' terminal. The machine began to spark. Redundancy detected. System compromised. Buttons shut down. The next day, Corey and John were expelled and Lucas got the highest grade in class. Later that night, Lucas's mom called. "Your great-aunt Gladys died," she said. "She left you her house. It's in Pennsylvania." After 13 hours, Lucas pulled into the cracked driveway of 114 Eld Hollow Road, his new home. 2 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a sagging garage-basement combo, and the lingering smell of lavender and dust. It had belonged to his great-aunt Gladys, who said Wrightsville was a splendid sight to see as the flames consumed the wooden structure or something like that. She always tended to ramble. He barely shut the door before a woman in a lilac tracksuit marched up, clipboard in hand. "I'm Gertrude, HOA treasurer. Your trash bins are an inch off regulation, and that shrub's too tall, but I filed a waiver." "You're welcome." "I also have an OnlyFans, knitting, just socks and seasonal patterns. People assume things." Then she turned and walked off, muttering about someone's unapproved mailbox decals. Lucas was still processing when a voice called from across the street. "You got dogs?" A shirtless man in sweatpants leaned on a walrus-shaped mailbox. "I'm Alex Voodoo. I used to be a proctologist. People were too political, so now I do animals. Way more honest. Cleaner, too. Trump once tried to deport me to Home Depot," Alex added. Long story. Anyway, welcome. He wandered off, pausing to photograph a squirrel's butt. Inside, Lucas dropped his bag. The fridge held a stick of butter. The house was quiet, creaky, and weirdly comforting. The past year flashed through his mind. Pies delivered to dogs, a calculator that taught philosophy, someone who saw the future from a bathroom mirror, and a vending machine exorcism attempt. And now, this. He opened a window. Cool air drifted in. Somewhere, a wind chime clinked off-key. Lucas smiled. "Life doesn't make sense," he said, "but that means anything's still possible.